Aunt Lydia has barely appeared in the Testament so far, but somehow she's still haunting every frame. And as we move deeper into the series, one question becomes impossible to ignore. How is the show going to resolve the Aunt Lydia problem? Because the writers aren't just juggling two completely different backstories, Book Lydia and Show Lydia, they also have to explain, how did Lydia go from almost being hung at the end of The Handmaid's Tale to then suddenly becoming immortalised with a statue in her honour? If the next episode shifts into Lydia's perspective, which I'm anticipating that it will, the show has a lot to address. How does a bitter, insecure schoolteacher become a master of secrets? How does a true believer turn into someone who might be plotting Gilead's downfall? Today we're breaking down what I call the Aunt Lydia problem, and why her rivalry with Aunt Vidala is the key to understanding her past, and how missing book scene could be key in completely changing her future. In the novel, Aunt Lydia's backstory is a little more morally complex than in the show. Pre-Gilead, she was a successful family court judge. She was respected, successful, and surrounded by a network of professional women who looked up to her, who trusted her. In the book, Lydia recalls being captured at work and dragged to a stadium, forced to watch women executed, until she was presented with a choice that would define the rest of her life. Join Gilead or face the same fate as the women who have been shot before her. But the choice isn't even that simple. It's not just to join. They want her to become one of the architects of the regime, writing the rules that keep the women confined, obedient, trapped. In the books, the horror of the Aunt system is in many ways Lydia's own design. However, there's a strategy beneath the submission. It's heavily implied that Lydia didn't break, she plotted. She realised that rebellion was a death sentence, and instead she chose the long game. She spent years collecting secrets, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And one thing is for sure, she is certainly patient. She views the commanders as small, predictable men, and frankly, she seems to enjoy making them dance to her tune while they remain blissfully unaware of her true power. But we do have to remember one crucial detail in the books, and that Lydia is an unreliable narrator. She is revealing her version of events. She is writing her private account, begging the reader to understand her, and more importantly, to forgive her. Because we are hearing her version of history, she's naturally going to paint her collaboration as necessary and her intentions as noble. It raises the ultimate question for the show. Is Lydia actually a heroic double agent? Or is she just a villain who's really good at making excuses? The show version gives us a Lydia who is, well, let's just say she's not a high-powered judge. In the series, she's lonely, bitter, and deeply insecure. Her cruelty doesn't come from political strategy, it comes from wounded pride. If you remember her backstory, she turned in a child's mother, Noelle, a person she had built a relationship with, simply because she blamed her for making Lydia put herself out there. She couldn't handle the shame of a man asking her to slow down after a date. And let's be clear, he wasn't rejecting her, he was just saying slow down. She destroyed that family with the view that she was protecting the child. But it was nothing to do with that. It was all about her shame and her own hurt. And this is the foundation of Show Lydia, a woman who weaponises morality to soothe her own insecurities. Once Gilead is established, Lydia survives by lying to herself. She convinces herself she's helping the girls to reach their full potential, but she constantly mistakes fearful obedience for genuine loyalty. This is really shown in her relationship with Janine. Lydia calls it love. But is it? Janine didn't love her back. She was broken by Lydia until she became a childlike shadow of her former self. To Lydia, Janine was a trophy of the perfect handmaid. And we all know how well that worked out for Janine. This version of Lydia does not have the strategic abilities of Book Lydia. She constantly oversteps, constantly misreads the room, and Commander Lawrence repeatedly reminds her she has no real power and never will.
Watch your tone.
But at the end of The Handmaid's Tale, the facade finally cracks. Seeing the true ugliness of the regime and finally realising what she did to Janine becomes her turning point. She helps the handmaids escape and ends up on the gallows, facing the very Gilead justice she spent years enforcing. With the help of Mayday making an appearance, disrupting the execution, she survives, appearing one last time to hand Angela back to Janine. But that leaves the show with a massive gap to explain. How did she get from being a near traitor, on the verge of execution, to the feared, statue-worthy aunt that Agnes describes in the new series? How does a woman who lost everything gain the seniority to reign over Ardua Hall? Well, the show has a choice. Does it force Lydia back into the book's blueprint, or does it forge a brand new path for Lydia, taking inspiration from the books? Agnes gives us the biggest clue in episode 1. Aunt Lydia was worshipped, then vilified, then worshipped again, implying that people knew what she'd done. Her reputation had changed multiple times, history was rewritten after the purges, and somehow she survived it all. But not only did she survive, she seems to have come out on top. So how does it go about bridging that gap? Well, the stadium scene was a key part of Lydia's origin story in the books, and on the casting list for the Testaments there is a credit for the stadium guard, suggesting that they will put this scene in. It could still form part of Show Lydia's backstory from when she became part of Gilead to try and get viewers to empathise more with her. Or the writers could include it further down in her arc. It could be an opportunity to add the stadium scene after the Battle of Massachusetts. Lydia is caught. Gilead knows she helped the handmaids escape. She's dragged to the stadium, not as a new recruit, but as a traitor. The commanders threaten her with death, but Lydia is able to bargain. As far as we are aware, all of the commanders in Massachusetts have died, so she could provide an alternative version of events. But I'm guessing that this wouldn't be enough. Maybe she offers up a location of an escaped handmaid to prove her loyalty and make us think less of her again. Or maybe this is where she pitches the Pearl Girls. She convinces the commanders that this is the perfect way of expanding their reach, whilst also being able to use this as a program to gain information for herself. From this point to the start of the Testaments, the show can give Lydia time to learn exactly how Gilead works and exactly where its weak spots are. She can suss out the new commanders, understand the power structure, define her political strategy. And I think one of the clues for this turning point could actually be related to her rivalry of Aunt Vidala, because in theory, Aunt Vidala should be a model aunt. She fits Lydia's rules. I think to Lydia, Aunt Vidala is a mirror of the old Lydia, a person who thrives on cruelty, has zero empathy for the girls, and wraps it all up in ideology. Lydia hates Vidala because she hates the ghost of her own past. But Aunt Lydia needs to be careful here, as Aunt Vidala could turn out to be a big threat throughout the seasons. She is power hungry, and I'm guessing that unlike the commanders, she isn't as easily as fooled by Lydia's performance. Vidala is already questioning the Pearl Girl program. In the halls of Ardua Hall, Lydia is playing a game of chess where one wrong move, one moment of mercy, caught by Vidala, means the gallows. The show having the time to expand upon the books means they have time for additional storylines, and they'll have time to play with the dynamic between these two characters. Aunt Lydia's motivations will keep us guessing. Is she a victim playing a long game, or a villain who finally found her conscience? As the show progresses, I'll be doing a deep dive into every secret she uncovers, and the version of Lydia we see in the Testaments, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss it. How are you finding the show so far? Do you think Lydia can ever be redeemed, or is she just protecting herself? Let me know your theories in the comments, and if you want to know how Naomi Putnam fits into this web, then check out my video on her right here. And as always, I'll see you next time.